woodcraft, helping you make woodwork.
So yeah, today we're going to just talk about vacuum pressing and not so much veneers and that kind of thing, but just demonstrate how the press works. It won't take very long, but basically I like to refer to this thing as it's like a food saver on steroids. It's just a big bag that you're sucking the air out of, and it just puts even amount of pressure all over the object or objects. The nice thing about it is that pressure will be between 1,500 and 1,700 pounds a square foot, and it will also conform to any odd-shaped item that you have in the bag. Now, before you can use one of these things, you have to have a source of vacuum. You cannot use a shop vac. That won't work. It doesn't apply enough pressure, so you have to have a vacuum pump. And so if you get on that Joe Woodworker site, will tell you about vacuum pumps. Woodcraft also sells a vacuum pump just by itself. It also sells a kit that has the pump, the bag, and the gauge and everything. So basically you take it out of the box and it's ready to go. And that's not necessarily, I think it's like $392, but that's not necessarily a bad price because, again, you take it out of the bag or the box and it's just ready to go. So I've got a homemade vacuum generator here. You've seen that before, so you can do that one, or you can use the Venturi, which uses compressed air to generate a vacuum. Either one will work just fine for this application. So the bag, or the components, you got to have a bag, but let me talk about some of the stuff that goes in it. First of all, you have to have what's called a platen, which is this piece of melamine. You can see how some of the white stuff is scratched off, but it's still a non-stick surface insofar as glue is concerned. If you go to the lumber yards, a lot of times they'll have damaged sheets of this stuff, and you can just pick it up and score it on the table saw. These are about 1/8 of an inch deep, these scores. And it's scored on both sides, and the reason for that is so it will draw air out uniformly from every area inside the bag. You'll notice that the corners on this is rounded off. Typically what you should try and do it puts so much pressure when items are in the bag, you should ease the corners a little bit if you can. Now, it used to be that you needed a platen for both the bottom, which you do, and also the top, which you don't now because they have come up with this plastic mesh, and this goes on top of the object being pressed. There's also another item called a caul, which is C-A-U-L, and that's if you're going to be doing a large span of veneering, for example, on a tabletop. This cauls are kind of bowed a little bit, and you clamp them on each end, and it puts pressure on the area or whatever that you're veneering. The bad news is it's not evenly applied pressure as hard as you could try. That's the beauty behind vacuum veneering, vacuum bagging. And of course you need the bag. So let me get this out of here. Now, this is here that I got this mesh. When you order these bags, I don't know how the ones from Woodcraft come. But if you have the option of getting them delivered to you rolled up, that's the best way to really store these bags. I've had this unrolled and I have the mesh inside of it already. Here is the opening, and I roll this bag up so that the air or the exhaust is always sticking out as opposed to having that press against the. So now this is, it's going to be very obvious very quickly that it's nice to have a lot more real estate to do this on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take this like this. That's the full size of the bag. Swing it up here like that. Mark, could I have your help just a second? What we're going to do, we have the bag, top and bottom, and we have the mesh. Now this platen needs to go between the, it has to go between the bottom of the bag and it just slides in there. That part actually goes pretty easy. There, perfect, perfect. So what we have so far, I don't want to leave a goodly amount up here so I can get the closure on it. There we.
Bob, when you get this is 4 foot wide, but they allow you a little bit more on the.
Yeah, this
4 foot here, is it?
Well, no, this is actually about 60 inches wide, I think. And the one thing you want to be careful of when you put a platen inside your bag is you don't want to have the platen stick. You need to leave about 4 inches of clearance around the edge of it, because it could put pressure on the seam. But you can see now this one has been electrically welded and it should be leak free. So we got this part set up so far. Now, what you should do next, this is the closer, or the closure rod. It's a piece of PVC pipe with the clip on it. And you roll it on there and put the clip on it. Sometimes it's handy to have like a little rubber mallet or a dead blow mallet to hammer that blue piece home again. But I've found that by starting at the end and going from side to side, it's easy to put the closure strip on there. Now what you should do at this point before you start gluing up things to put in here, you should close the bag and draw a vacuum on it. And just to make sure. Yeah, because the last thing you want to do is be missing a piece or have a problem when you've got wet glue. So I checked this yesterday, so I'm going to forego that. So this should be good and ready to go. Now, we put this down here. I'm going to make sure your vacuum pump is all ready to go. Now the connections at the pump and at the bag are going to vary with the manufacturer. This is kind of standard fittings. This is kind of about the same size as on a bicycle tire. I've got this little adapter thing here. This is a little clip that goes on here and then into here. So I've got the bag ready. I've got the platen in it. I've got the mesh in it. That should be ready to go. I've got the closure all ready to go. The pump is here, it's plugged in. That should be ready to go. And at this point, I think we may be ready to do some gluing. I got a couple little pieces of plywood here. I'm going to simulate veneering. Now, a word about veneering. The piece you're veneering to, and I'm talking about veneering right now, is called the substrate. Typically, it's going to be like MDF or something like that. Medium density fiberboard is the most stable, and it really won't bend. And you always veneer on both sides of the substrate. So if this is a substrate, you put a piece of cheap veneer on this side and then the spendy stuff over here. And it's good, I've been told that it's good to have the same species of wood. For example, if you have a piece of figured walnut as your veneer, just use plain old walnut on the back of it. And what that does is it keeps it from shifting. But with like 1 3/4, 1 inch MDF, that's not going to go very far anyway. So we're going to pretend that this is my substrate, and we're going to pretend that this is my veneer. The other thing too is you never put veneer on the, or glue on the veneer, because by the time you get it over here, it will wrinkle. So we'll put a little glue on here. And I'm just going to use yellow glue. You typically would use cold pressed glue for veneer. Let's see if I can get this open. Hopefully this is... I haven't used this jug of glue for a while. We'll pour a little out of here. And I found that the best way to get this evenly applied is to use a roller, whether it's a foam roller or a hard rubber roller. Hard rubber roller actually might be a little bit better. And you got to make sure that you get the glue all the way out to the edges. I'm going to put that right in there. And now we're going to lay our veneer on top of there. And we'll slip it in the bag. Now remember that this goes right on top of the platen. We'll stick it in up here. Make sure everything is nice and even. I'm also going to stick this little piece of demo wood, and it's got a little round over here with a little, what do you call this part here? I can't remember. A bead, yeah. Anyway, I'm going to just toss this in there too, so you can see how this thing will conform to different shapes. Let me move this over just a little bit. Everything seems to be okay. It's kind of neat to watch the bag squish down on all this. Okay, now, again, this is where it helps to have a little extra room. Make sure that is flat. I'm going to take this. The closure rod is always longer than the bag is wide. Should have an inch or two sticking out on either side. Come down here. I was telling you that sometimes it's handy to have a rubber mallet or a dead blow hammer to do this part. Make sure that you got it all. Okay, now we're going to hook up our hose here. Now this pump does make a little noise, but it's not too bad. And it's going to take a couple minutes to evacuate the air. It doesn't look like anything's happening, but stuff is happening. I've got the pressure switch on this set to turn off at 20 inches of mercury, which is about 1,500 pounds a square foot. Right now we're at about 9 or 10 inches of mercury, so it's still got a little bit to suck out. So now this thing will sit here like this, and if air does get in there a little bit, which it inevitably will, there's somewhere in this whole thing, there's a little bit of a leak. The pressure will drop down and it'll turn the pump on. That's the nice thing about this. A lot of pumps that you use, they just run. Mm-hmm. So anyway, this will just have to stay in here for a few minutes, and we'll just let it go. When you're done with this, you just pull this off and take it away. I do sometimes, if I have an air compressor available, I'll just go ahead and inflate this like a balloon, and it kind of draws the air up. It just kind of puffs it up a little bit, makes it a little easier to get out. One other thing too that you can do, not only by having the linear table space to lay this whole bag out, and a 4x8 sheet of plywood is a pretty good size for doing that. A lot of folks that use these things a lot will build a little bridge that comes up and down out of 2x4s or whatever, and they'll get little spring clamps, and that holds the top of the bag. So if you don't have a third hand around to help you get stuff in there, you can pin a thing.
Yeah.
So that thing just comes up and over, and you screw some clamps into it. So now, obviously, Woodcraft, good store that it is, has all the stuff you need to do this with. They've got the glue. They also have hide glue that you put in the glue pot. If you ever want to start doing hammering veneer, which is, the Egyptians did that, and they didn't have vacuum. Things like veneer tape. Again, never use masking tape on veneer. Just use this. This is a paper tape, and take that off. Take that off. Break the seal. Come up here. And I would normally have let this go a little bit. You could probably work this right now, though. And it's ready to go. It's not coming apart. And the nice thing to know is that every place on this surface has had equal pressure applied.
That's cool.